In this video, I'm going to recap over externalities, both positive and negative, and then I'm going to discuss CBA, or cost-benefit analysis, which is another part of the externalities topic that you need to know for Unit 4. So let's start with a bit of a recap. This, as you should be able to work out from the graph, is an externalities graph that shows external benefit. We can see that it's an external benefit graph because we've got two benefit lines. We've got private benefit and social benefit. And so you should know that the gap between the two lines here, that represents the externality. And the externality should be drawn as a triangle, like that. So that triangle represents the positive externality. Now, where my cursor is right there at the marginal private benefit line, this is where the economy starts from. This is where we are in a free market. But the socially optimum level is up here, where the marginal social benefit line is. And just look, there's a difference between quantity. So quantity at the free market is at QE, but it goes up to Q2 when we're at the socially optimum level. So what we're saying is this: if you've got a product that has a external benefit, it means that currently it's not being used enough. We, i.e. the government, want to encourage more people to use the product, so therefore they can move quantity demanded, to this point here. Now there's various ways to do that. There's various ways to encourage people to use your product. Something that we looked at was subsidies. So if you make the product cheaper for the supplier, they will supply more at a cheaper price. And that links in with the electricity companies, as we discussed. In the electricity companies may receive subsidies from the government if they use green energy. So things like wind farms or nuclear power because it's renewable, or solar energy, for example. So this graph right here, you should be able to recognize and draw this. This represents a positive externality. Examples of products with positive externalities include libraries, because the more people that use libraries, the more benefit to society they are. One, we've got books in. I know that seems kind of obvious, but libraries have books in, they have knowledge. So going to a library gives you knowledge. Also, they're a free place for people to go. They are warm. Some old people, some people who don't have jobs will just hang around the library all day. I was once in Brixton Library and I saw a giant rat. So there you go. But generally, libraries do have a positive externality. They are good overall for society. Secondly, another example, solar power. Now that relates to the case study for this year's Unit 4 exam. Solar power has a positive externality. Why? Well, because it is clean energy. It is energy that doesn't pollute. It simply takes energy from the sun's rays. So encouraging more people to use solar power is an aim of the government. That's why you would say at the moment, to go back, that solar power would be about here. It is underprovided. We don't have a society where loads and loads of people use solar power. That would be up there. Remember, not everyone has to use the product. We just want more people to use it than they currently are. Obviously, to evaluate though, there are issues with solar power here in the UK, in that we only have about 3 days of sun throughout the whole year. So probably actually, for us personally, maybe not the best type. And finally, we've got buses, another example of a positive externality, because if people use buses, buses pollute less than cars. Let's say you could fit 50 people on a bus, therefore that would be 30 or 40 cars that you wouldn't need. Also, buses actually, we now have hybrid buses, a bit like this one, which actually use a combination of electricity and petrol, so they actually pollute even less than they used to. Also, that saves space on the roads as well. That's 40 or 50 cars that won't be on the roads as well. And they're cheap as well, much cheaper to run than having to pay for petrol all the time. So these three products have clear positive externalities. And we're going to go back to this example in a minute of the bus. On this particular one, you should be able to recognize that this is a negative externality diagram, mainly because it has the word negative externality written above the top. I probably should have taken that off. But without that, if that wasn't there, you could still see that this was a negative externality diagram because it has two cost lines. We've got private cost and a social cost. And the gap between the private and the social cost, this gap here, this represents the negative externality. And just as the positive one, I was about to say just as the positive one, there's meant to be a triangle. Just use your imagination. A triangle should be here. Now, we are currently here in the free market when you're talking about a negative externality. And we want to be at the socially optimum level, which is there. And this is the opposite to a positive externality, because instead of trying to encourage more quantity, we actually want less quantity. If you look down at QE and Q2, what we're trying to do is move quantity from here backwards to there. And again, we're not trying to make everyone in the whole country stop using the product. We're just trying to lower the amount of people that are using it. So we're trying to lower quantity if we are the government. Examples of products with negative externalities include sort of really loud clubs that are really, really loud and in residential areas. There's an example in Chelsea, a club that was, I think it was a club/bar that was run by a friend of Prince Harry's, got shut down because the locals in the Chelsea area where the club was kept moaning all the time, because every sort of weeknight and every weekend you'd get loads of really drunk people out on the street in the middle of the night throwing up and getting up to all sorts of stuff. So that was causing noise pollution, that was annoying the locals, it was having a negative effect on society. So it was affecting people, therefore it had a negative externality. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Ask FM, if you're like 12 or whatever. All of these social media sites have negative externalities. Why? Because people's actions affect other people. Someone posts something on Twitter, it enrages other people. Now it depends. If you do it on purpose, that's technically not a negative externality. Remember, when we're talking about externalities, the key word is that it is the unintended spillover effect. So if you post something on Twitter on purpose to annoy people, to troll people, to get them angry, that's not a negative externality. That's just you being annoying. However, if you post something on Twitter and you just accidentally cause people to be upset, you could say that was a negative externality. So those are two examples of products with negative externalities. Now let's go back to the idea of the bus. Think about a bus for a second. We said that this bus right here has hybrid energy, so therefore it's slightly better for the environment than a car. It carries lots of customers, so it gets cars off the road. I think there's one guy there. Very clearly no one wants to go to Victoria. But as well as having a lot of benefits to society, you could argue that buses also have negative effects on society as well. So as well as having positive externalities, buses also have negative externalities. For example, yes, it might be a hybrid, but it still pollutes, it still causes pollution, so it's not completely good for the environment. The ideal situation would be no buses, no cars whatsoever. Everyone would cycle or walk around London. So it does have that negative externality. Also, buses are very large vehicles and can cause serious accidents, cause massive amount of damage to other cars if they hit them. Pedestrians sadly get killed by buses quite often in London. Those are negative externalities. Lots of buses together on the same kind of road can cause a bit of congestion as well. So there's various positive and negative externalities, and that falls under the idea of CBA, otherwise known as cost benefit analysis. I hadn't forgotten, I just paused for dramatic effect. Cost benefit analysis. Now, what is that? Well, this is what the government does. They carry out cost benefit analysis before deciding whether to introduce tax or subsidy. So every single product has positive externalities and negative externalities. However, what the government has to do is they have to work out, using cost benefit analysis, whether the external cost is bigger or whether the external benefit is bigger. So they work out which one is bigger. Remember though, when we're talking about externalities, a great evaluation point you can say is it's really difficult to actually work out a figure for external costs and benefits. Remember, externalities are worked out using money, so you've got to work out the money value. So when you talk about pollution, how could you put a figure, a number on pollution? I mean, pollution is not a cost-based thing, it's something that happens to the environment. So the government's got to work out somehow how much this product is costing this society and how much it is benefiting society, and they work out which one's bigger. If the benefits are bigger than the costs, then they sort of say, well, this is a good thing. The benefits are bigger than the cost. Maybe we put a subsidy on it, so we want more people to use it. If the cost outweighs the benefit, so there's more external cost than there is benefit, they might put a tax on that product and might try to get people to use less of it. Now, I should point out, this is not a scientific sort of exercise. I mean, it is impossible to actually work it out. So sometimes the government might get it wrong. They might think that a product is particularly good for society when it's kind of not really at all, and then waste loads of money giving subsidies. Or vice versa, they might think a product's really bad for society. Well, actually it's not really that bad at all, and so they might sort of tax it when really they don't need to do that. Another thing that you need to know about externalities is we've spoken about tax, and we've said tax is a way that the government uses to reduce supply, but also they use something called legislation. If a product has a large external cost, the government might put a tax on it, but they might use legislation. Legislation is just another name for laws, so they might create some laws. So as it says here, legislation involves the government creating laws to control who can buy a product, how much they can buy, or where it can be sold. So for example, alcohol. There is legislation on alcohol. You cannot buy this stuff if you are under the age of 18. So straight away, we've cut out a load of the population. So that's lowered supply straight away. 2, you cannot buy this stuff before or after a certain time of day. So again, legislation to try and cut down on supply. We don't want people drinking 24 hours a day. 3rd one, you cannot buy this alcohol from everywhere. You couldn't go into a post office and buy alcohol. You couldn't go into a hairdresser's and buy alcohol. People have to apply for a special license. So legislation is a way of, again, combating products with external costs. It's a way of lowering supply. If they don't want to put a tax on it, maybe they'll put some laws in place. Or in the case of alcohol, they'll put a tax on it and laws in place as well. So I'll leave you to look at this amazing selection of different alcohol, and once you're done, I suggest you go and practice some exam questions.